Hi, this is Professor Melissa Hall, and this is a brief introduction to my Art 108 Ancient to Medieval class. Let's start with the question, what is art? And here's a definition from Merriam-Webster Dictionary: the conscious use of skill and creative imagination in the production of an aesthetic object. Human beings have been making art since the beginning of time. Why do we do this? Experts identify 5 major purposes of art. The oldest form of art was made for religious or ceremonial purposes. Most of the art we will study in this class was made for religious purposes. Narrative art is art that tells a story. We've been using art to tell stories since the very beginning of civilization. Functional art is made to be used in everyday life. It includes pottery, quilts, and furniture. Our ancestors enriched their surroundings with decorative objects that expressed wealth and status or gave praise to their gods. Persuasive art is made to persuade people to do something or think a certain way. Advertising and propaganda are types of persuasive art. Many ancient rulers used art to promote their power and to mold public opinion. Before the invention of modern media, art was pretty much the only means of social communication. Expressive art is made to express the personal feelings or emotions of the artist. Vincent van Gogh is a perfect example of an expressive artist. But the idea of art as personal expression is a very modern concept. In most ancient societies, artists were not expected to express their own individual vision. They worked in teams rather than alone, and they were valued for their skill rather than their intellect or creativity. Their social status was similar to other skilled laborers, such as carpenters and masons. And so they were expected to meet the demands of their patron, the person who commissioned the work of art, rather than express their own personal vision. So this means that we're going to have to adjust our expectations and consider the intentions of the patron rather than the artist when evaluating the intended meaning or message of a work. Now, what is art history? Here's a definition from Carleton University. Art history is the study of human expression through history. Art historians develop ways to translate from the visual to the verbal through analysis and interpretation, using a number of different approaches and methodologies. And here's a definition from Professor Julia C. Fisher. She says, I look at works of art as historical documents. They're a reflection of their particular time and their particular place. As an art historian, I try to understand the meaning of a particular work by placing it within its historical and cultural context. Basically, art historians are time travelers. What methods do art historians use to analyze art? The basic method is visual analysis, and that's a skill you're going to be learning in this class. Visual analysis involves a description of what you actually see and an informed analysis and interpretation of what it means. And there are 4 basic steps to a visual analysis, which will also be the 4 basic components of any written essay for this class. And those steps are identification, subject matter description, analysis of style, and interpretation of meaning. The first step in a visual analysis is to properly identify the work. And this is similar to beginning a book report by naming the author and the title of the book. So this is the information that typically appears on a museum label. So this is a work. The identification label is the artist is Dwayne Hansen. The title of the work is Tourists. The period civilization, he's an American contemporary artist, and the date is 1970. The medium or material, this is a work of sculpture, and the material is what it's made of, polyester resin. Dimensions are often important. This work is life-size. We're going to be looking at works that look really big on the screen, and then we're surprised to discover they're only 4 inches tall. And then the location or museum. Some works of art are still in the place that they were built, Stonehenge, for example. This is a work of art that currently, if we wanted to see it today, we would have to go to the National Galleries of Scotland. The next step is a description of the work. Be literal. Describe what you see before drawing conclusions. This example that I've used in class, when I ask students, what are we looking at? Let's describe it. The first thing they say is that these are two tourists. But that's not a description, that's actually an interpretation. That's a conclusion about the work. A visual analysis requires you to identify and describe the details that will support your conclusion that this work represents two tourists. So how do we know they're tourists? We're describing a sculpture. So we want to describe, how do they appear? Are they old? Are they young? Are they fat? Are they good looking? Are they funny looking? What are they doing? What are they wearing? What are they carrying? These are the basic sort of criteria when analyzing a sculpture representing a human figure. You want to describe their appearance, you want to describe their pose, and you also want to describe their costume or their attributes, things that they are carrying. All of these are kind of clues to the meaning or message of the work. So now let's try to analyze an ancient work of art. This is a statue we're going to be studying in class. Like most ancient art, we don't know the name of the artist. The title is Menkare, and I can't pronounce her name, so my students have nicknamed her Kim. It belongs to Egypt, the Old Kingdom. The date you can see there. It's a sculpture, and the material, the type of stone, is called greywacke. And here's an example. This looks like a life-size statue, but it's really only 4 feet 6.5 inches tall, which will really change the way we relate to the work. And finally, if you wanted to see it today, it's in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. When describing a work of art, imagine you're talking to someone on the phone or that your reader has their eyes closed. Your job is to bring the image to life so your reader can see it without looking at the picture. Your description should also persuade your reader to see the work the way that you do, to get a feeling for the personality of the work. You don't want it to be just a boring description. You want to capture something about the work. And the details you describe should be very carefully chosen. I get so many descriptions where, the robe is red, the bag is blue. Here's a description written by Professor Christopher Whitcomb at Sweetbriar College. Note the words the author uses to persuade us to see this statue as an expression of kingly power. Menkare is portrayed in the familiar Egyptian pose, standing as if at attention with his left leg extended forward, his arms held stiff at his sides, and his fists clenched holding some unidentified cylindrical objects. His stance appears assertive, indicative of his power. He's represented as a mature yet vigorous man, perhaps in his 30s, with slender hips, broad shoulders, and well-developed arms. On his head he wears a nimis, or headdress, the sides of which are pulled back behind his rather large ears, with the lappets falling to either side of his chest. The beard and the headdress are the primary symbols of his pharaonic status. Besides the headdress, the only other article of clothing he wears is a shendit kilt, which is folded across the front with one end falling down beneath and held in place with a belt around his waist. Now notice the use of words. He describes his arms as being stiff. He appears assertive. He's mature yet vigorous, slender hips, broad shoulders, and well-developed arms. All of these descriptive details are very carefully chosen to not just describe, but also persuade us to get a feeling for the powerful impression this statue is making on the writer. And I think this example demonstrates how a good description can really help us see the work more clearly, and it can help us as the reader to draw a conclusion about its intended message or meaning. The next step in a visual analysis is analysis of style. This involves a close examination of the technical and stylistic features of the work. For example, why did the artist portray the figures in such stiff poses? Why is there no space between the bodies and the limbs? Why was this particular type of stone used? Is the statue typical of the period or culture, or is it different, and why? Now, all of these questions will be answered when we complete the unit on Egyptian art. I think this demonstrates that while a description can be done without taking an art history class, an analysis requires the knowledge that you're going to be gaining in this class. The fourth and final step in a visual analysis is interpretation of meaning. Your interpretation should not just be your personal opinion. It must be supported by your knowledge of the culture and evidence within the work itself. And these are things we're going to be learning in the unit on Egyptian art. What was the purpose of the statue? What message was it intended to communicate? And who was the audience for this message? Knowing where the work was originally displayed can tell us a lot about its original function and meaning. Thanks for listening, and I'm looking forward to getting started with the class.